Mambition, woohoo!
Hi, everyone.
Hello and welcome back to Mambition.
We're your hosts. I'm Alex.
And this is Tiffany. Now, guys, on this one, we have an amazing guest for you. This is Amy Lynch. I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about Amy. So, Amy is the founder and podcast host of Mixing Babies and Business. Amy's social impact movement began as an accidental activist when she found a lack of accessible spaces for parents in entrepreneurship and business events. With over 2 decades of experience across various industries, Amy has worked in flexible and remote roles across the world, balancing her career and family life as a parent of three. Since 2016, she's been creating events, resources, and spaces that support primary caregivers in entrepreneurship and flexible work. Amy has been recognized for her work in Canada's top 100 recovery projects and spoken on stages around the globe about the importance of flexibility for working parents. Welcome to Ambition, Amy. Woohoo!
Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem, no problem. I think I'm really excited about this because I love what you represent and what you're doing at the moment. I think a great place to start will be, can you share that first moment when you thought, sod it, I'm taking my child to this business event?
Yeah, so my first son was born in England. We lived in West Hampstead in London. And when I think he was not even 2 weeks old, I applied. It was like midnight. I was in between cluster feeding him. And I knew that Google's Google for Startups program for parents was going to launch again around the time that I had him, but they hadn't said when. So it came up on Instagram, I think. And I thought, I just have to apply now while he's asleep because he was a newborn. So I did the application, middle of the night, got accepted. And the next month I started at Campus for Moms with him, and he was about 7 weeks old. I was just literally cleared from my postpartum checkup the week before, brought him to Farringdon every week for 10 weeks of that program. And it was designed for parents, but some parents weren't bringing their kids. So some of them had preschool or school already, but other ones came up to me during the sessions and would say, wow, you're so brave bringing him, or good on you. He's only 7 weeks. And I just thought, well, this program's designed for parents. Of course, I'm going to bring him. So that was my first kind of introduction to not only like London's tech startup scene. I'd been previously working in education and training, but the Google campus in Farringdon was set up as kind of to increase the amount of tech companies in London. And they achieved that goal so well that they no longer have that campus as active anymore or with the same mandates. But so I did this program. All the guest speakers each week were talking about a different topic, and some were parents, some were not. And just hearing them and their advice and pitching to them. The first week that I arrived, we had to do a little intro, like an elevator pitch, and my son spit up all over me. And I was wearing a white t-shirt. I had no extra clothes. And all these parents came up to me and were trying to like help me, give me wipes, all this stuff. But because I had that kind of like soft start, I think, as a new parent, it was almost like, in addition to the midwife support I had, another layer of support. And as part of that program, they gave us tickets to this tech conference that was taking place at a microbrewery, but they wanted to increase the number of women founders present. So they gave everybody free passes that wanted it. And I believe I was the only one who went. I didn't see anybody else go. And a bunch of people had talked about it before, but I went and I brought my son. And that was near, I feel like it was like Liverpool Street or something, or another really busy spot in London. And I brought him up all these stairs at a microbrewery and thought, wow, I'm glad I brought him in the baby carrier because I wouldn't have been able to get in this place. And I went to this startup event that was supposed to be for all genders and walked around the booths, tried to go to some of the talks, but it was definitely just not designed for people like me.
I think even holding it in a brewery.
Yeah, like I just was like, okay, going up 4 flights of stairs. There's probably not a baby change table here. I didn't find one. And I was going to leave, but I thought, no, I'm here now. if you've ever taken the tube in London, like once you go somewhere, it's like you do one thing a day usually. So that was my thing. I went, and the entire time I felt like people looked at me like I was an alien. No one outright said to me, "Why are you here?" But nobody came up and said, "Hi, nice to meet you." They just kind of looked at me and then looked away, or kept moving on. And even the ones that were at booths trying to talk about their startup didn't engage with me. But one person, who is a woman, did come up to me at the very end, and she worked with the conference team. And she asked if I needed anything. Well, I believe I was breastfeeding in a corner. And she asked if I needed anything, and she thanked me for coming. And she said, "I really hope more people like you keep coming to these things, and I'm so glad that you came."
Wow.
That was it. But I just thought, okay, that's one person out of probably, there was hundreds of people. It was like not as big as Collision Conference, but it was pretty busy. And then I just kept going to things with him because I didn't have childcare. I was exclusively breastfeeding. We didn't have family nearby. And then same with when we relocated, I just kept bringing him because I thought, well, he relies on me for a food source. I could not go to things, or I could just bring him and then take breaks as I need to. So that's what I did.
Wow.
I'm in awe, really. Sorry, go ahead, Tiffany.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
I was just going to say, I love the phrasing of accidental activist, because I think it's really hard sometimes to see these things before you're in the situation. Like you might know that it's hard to be a parent and attend things with your child, but unless you're actually having that experience and realizing, how people ignored you, it wasn't set up for parents. Unless you're in that space, you kind of don't really maybe see all of the problems. And then being able to see the problems, you've had to be the one that's kind of pushing. And do you feel, were you the only parent?
I mean, I'm sure there was parents there, but nobody with kids. But I think if it wasn't for, I'll say Sarah Drinkwater was the head of community or the head of Campus London at that time. And I did go to some campus events that weren't for parents, but they were advertised to us as community members. As part of the program, we got a pass to the co-working community, all the space. But again, I wouldn't always go to the stuff because it wasn't always the time that I could get to. But I did go to one, and I remember her leading a panel with tech founders, and she stopped and she waved at me. And I just felt like, okay, I belong here. And just little things like that. If I hadn't gone to that program, I don't know if I would have been as confident. I did go to lots of things before having kids. I probably would have eventually, but because I had other parents would cut up my food for me during our workshops at campus for moms. And it was moms and dads in this program. And they would just help me, they would offer to hold my son so that I could use the washroom alone and things like that, the stuff that you don't even realize you're going to need before you become a parent that you just appreciate so much. So now whenever I'm in those spaces or anywhere really, like I was in the hospital ER over the weekend at the Children's Hospital with my oldest, and I talk to new parents all the time because I want to help reassure people now that people have done that for me. And I didn't really set out to be this burn it all down, smash the patriarchy person. But I also would comment on the fact that, okay, you say you're innovative, you say you're supporting female founders, but when I bring my kid and I try to breastfeed or I try to change them, you're telling me I can do it on the floor or on this couch or out in public. How is that encouraging people of all ages and all backgrounds to come here and participate? People are just going to opt out, and you won't even know, the demographics weren't being represented at some of the events I would be hosting for tech companies or consulting companies. And I would say, well, it's a 7 a.m. breakfast at a golf course. I don't think many women will be able to go unless they have live-in childcare or really early childcare setup openings. So there's all these things where people kind of seem to wonder why the representation isn't there, but then they're not always exploring the root underneath of why that might be.
I think it's sad. I think it's sad that even for me, I wouldn't lie, if I went to an event and I saw some of the baby, I probably would be quite shocked myself. And I think it's quite sad that we've almost alienated parents from a parenting event simply because, I don't know, we just don't expect them to come. But then at that kind of early stage of having a child, like you said, like the natural thing for that child to be is be with their mother or be with that person who's feeding them. And it's quite sad how even I would be shocked. And even I was shocked by your story. I think it shows how far we've gone down this journey of just excluding people from spaces simply by not making it normal that they can bring a child there.
Yeah, especially when it's a parenting event. It's not like aimed at parents. It's like some of these people will not have childcare, will not have settled their kids into childcare.
They just show up. They just feel like, oh, I can't do it, and they just won't come. So I do applaud you for just doing it.
Yeah, and I didn't do it with just the oldest. The other thing I did was I thought, okay, well, one child is this way, but I have 3 children now. They're all boys, and they're all 8, 6, and 2.5 years old. So I did have thoughts after each of them of, well, this is what I did with the last kid. I'll try it again. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. But then if you have more than one kid, every child is different, and they might settle differently or eat differently or sleep differently. And so I did have this thought of, well, maybe he was just like a unicorn baby when I brought him to all these things because he never cried. And people would ask me that when I would host meetups and business spaces. They would say, we have this other session going on in a room adjacent to here. Is it going to be loud when we host this event? Are the kids going to be screaming or crying? And I would be like, well, they can't always talk and tell us what they want, but usually in my experience, if the parent is with them and they're able to soothe them or settle them, they will cry less or they will scream less than if they're in an environment where they're separated from the parent, but they maybe can see them still, or they know they're in the same room or building, but they're not supposed to go near them. That's harder to me than being like, okay, sit on my lap or baby wearing whichever. So I did have those kind of questions. And I would say, like, I've been in workshops before where someone's notifications go off or their phone goes off or their alarm. How is that any less disruptive than a child in a workshop setting?
You did. I remember though during our initial chat, you did say you've had an experience I think a lot of us have not had, which is being in rooms with successful career-minded women who did mix business with babies. So I'd love to hear how that looks like, because I've never seen that before.
Yeah, so I did that campus program. There was, I think, 30 or 35 of us from across the UK, all different backgrounds, all different industry experience. And it was interesting just to see the different parenting styles, the different ages of the kids, the different backgrounds. One woman had experience with angel investing, so she offered to do a presentation on how to become an angel investor, impromptu for all of us. Also a mom of young kids. So we had this generosity and collaboration, and I kept in touch with a lot of them for years after. I still am in touch with some of them from social media or LinkedIn or whatever, but we would still, I remember hosting a call from Canada when we first relocated with a few people who are still interested in keeping, touching base on how their project was going or their startup idea or their career change or their family situation. And when I would host events here, I would always invite parents to speak on the panels or as the guest experts, but they're industry experts in their area or entrepreneurs in their area, but the criteria would always be they have to have children. And so they would deliver their session that they would normally deliver. Their topic, one of them was about closing sales or doing a sales process. And then the other person spoke about marketing. So we had a marketing and sales. Another one was about intellectual property. So we had a lawyer who specialized in that, and then a founder who had worked with that lawyer to protect their IP and then had exited their company successfully. But again, all parents. And they would present to this room of parents. I'd have a soft play area set up. The kids would either be in the center and we would kind of sit in a semicircle around them, or the play area would be off to the side. But kids would be running around. The presenters never stopped what they were doing. They would react and engage with the kids. It was just like, it humanizes people that you put on a pedestal, or you might think, I could never approach them, I could never talk to them. And it's been the same thing with my podcast. And that's why when you reached out to me, of course, I said, yeah, I'll be a guest, because I've reached out to so many people that didn't know me previously, and they've been so generous with their time and so open, speaking about their family experiences. And you don't often get that if you go to a conference or a networking event at a hotel where everyone has name badges and they're all kind of standing off to the side. You don't get that deep that quickly.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, Amy, about the generosity of people who come on and share their stories with us. Because for me, it's been really eye-opening to talk to all different people, and like you say, experts, but all parents, and kind of look behind the scenes a little bit. Because, you know, like you say, if you go to a big event or a conference, you're not going to get into how many children do you have, how do you juggle it, or, you know, you might chat about that a little bit, but you're not going to get into the deep conversation about how people manage to do both, and what it really looks like. And I think that contributes to people feeling like everyone else is being a successful parent and a success in the workplace, and they're not, and that they're not managing it because they can't see the kind of the behind the scenes struggles that people go through parenting, how they manage to balance it, and really the wisdom that you get from talking to other people helps to put people at ease.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll mention about that period of my life when I was hosting events, and it was kind of between my first few panel or workshop events, and trigger warning for anyone who's experienced baby loss. But I was pregnant in 2019, and I was about to host another event in October, around this time of the year, towards the end of the month. And I had a miscarriage, but I had a scan, and the baby was no longer progressing. So I was waiting to have a miscarriage, essentially. And it started right before I was about to host this event. And I remember I was at a business meeting downtown, and then I went to a conference at a hotel in the convention center. And one of my previous panel guests was there, and I remember her saying to me, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, not great, actually." And then I just told her. And I wouldn't have told people that normally, right? And I ended up trying to put that face on still. I was consulting for a client. I was doing under 30 hours a week at that point. My second son had just started childcare, but I was kind of doing all these things while miscarrying. And then I ended up having to cancel my event and email all the guests, and people had paid, it was a nominal fee of $10 to attend. So I refunded everyone, and I contacted the speakers and told them, and they were like, "Of course, like we'll be here whenever you want to host it again. We'll be here and we'll speak at your event." So then I did end up hosting it again in February 2020, right before everything closed down. But I'd been offered this amazing partnership by a startup space here, and I had planned to host more events before March 2020, but life didn't go that way. But as happens with many people are experiencing these kind of things all the time, and it's just stuff that nobody really talks about. But because I'd already kind of reached out to a network here and had that support early on for what I was doing, I felt a lot more held and supported in that very difficult experience. And also it opened me up to realizing just how many people it affects, and relating on a different level to parents, and a different kind of empathy when you've gone through something like that. So there's been lots of different things like that, where I think it's not all like sunshine and rainbows all the time and activism, but it can also really humanize these business spaces and conversations.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you. I think that must have been, you can't, words are always sometimes a little bit empty, isn't it, when you kind of refer to something like, but thank you for sharing that. And thank you for, I think, using that to, obviously, like I said, the empathy that you get, the bridge it builds to you connecting with someone else. Because, I think we live in a society where, we'll come to work and we try to be our best self, or you just never know what someone is experiencing. And I appreciate you for using that to be a difference, because I think it's hard, but you're trying to help other people through your own story. I'd love to know that. How did the podcast come about in terms of, you thinking, okay, I can impact the world through this medium as well?
So I studied journalism. I finished my degree in Australia, and I did do broadcast journalism as part of that. And I had actually volunteered for a local radio station as an announcer, doing news and things. And then I ended up I was in this sports club for this sport that I'd never played growing up, but I ended up learning when I was in Australia, and I would be the local commentator for the club. So I had some experience with radio and knew at some point I would like to do a podcast, I think. And that was in, say, 2012, 2013. And I started working with a company where they hired me to do webinars. And I ended up becoming a presenter for them. So I got a lot of experience presenting webinars to people in remote parts of Australia and across the country, and hosting other guest speakers. And that really prepared me. It was very like radio, where you're speaking to the void. You might not see the chat. Someone else might be facilitating the chat. So you're just speaking out what you think or presenting something, not being able to read the audience's face at all to see if it's landing. But I ended up really enjoying that and thought, okay, there's some transferable skills here if I ever want to start a podcast. So it was on my vision board. It was on my goals list before I even had our first son. And I never launched it until 2020, when everything closed. And I thought, well, I'm still going to have these conversations with people. I still want to do like a guest speaker style for people to host them, but I'm going to do it in a format that works for us. And at the time, both of my kids, when I started fleshing out the ideas for it, were under the age, they're not quite 4 and 2. They were home full time. Everything was closed here. My partner was working from home. I was home. We were all in the same house. So these 4 walls here of my studio, or my home office space, I thought, okay, I'll do a 30-minute window. I'll block it up in my calendar. My husband would take the kids for a walk or somewhere outside. Sometimes they would be in the house. And I would do a 30-minute interview. And I decided I'm going to split it up into 3 episodes so that I can get more episodes out of one, and also not put the pressure on myself to have like a new guest every week. So I thought I'll do 4 to 5 guests a season. It'll last maybe 10 to 12 weeks. And that's the format that I started with. And I launched it in November 2020. The first 2 seasons I just bootstrapped, and then Startup Canada approached me in 2021 to ask if I would want to join their network. And as part of that, they had some grants for community leaders, and they mentioned that my podcast could be potentially an application for a grant. So I ended up getting the past 3 seasons sponsored through Startup Canada. And this last season, season 6, that I'm currently rolling out, I've self-sponsored to promote the Changemaker program that I'm running this year. So it all kind of snowballed over time, I guess. But I set the bar very low for myself to just make it in a format that would be easy for me to keep doing, so that I wouldn't give up early on. And then I edited it all from home using the software that I had learned in school, and just figured out how to stream it online and promote it. And there's still so much I know I could be doing with it or improve on, but that's on my list. Like, I'd love to outsource some things. I'd love to hire other people and support other, ideally parents. I've had people approach me to help with the podcast, and I always say, are you a parent? Because I want to work with people who are also parents. So that's the next goal.
I love it. I love that you started doing just such short time periods as well. You like made it really bite-sized and achievable, but I can't even imagine doing that sometimes with the kids in the house.
Oh yeah. They were like, I would get them to do mic test 1 2 1 2, and I'd record it, and then I'd play it for them, and they'd be like,
Smart.
what? I'm on the radio. So, and I now tell them, like, my work is mommy runs a radio station from home while you're at school.
Mm.
So that's what we
You were
talk about.
telling us that your son was looking you up at school,
Yeah.
wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's true or not because they have restrictions, but I was like, are you allowed to go on YouTube? Are you allowed to go on this? But he told me a couple of years ago when he was more of a toddler, he was just very matter of fact. Well, what's it called? And I said, mixing babies and business. He's like, well, that'll never work because the babies will cry and the business will break. And I was like, wow, the patriarchy is ingrained in you, like the ancestral.
Really?
We're breaking generational cycles by continuing to have people download this thing and prove you wrong. So he's now able to see.
I'm going to show you.
Yeah, he's now like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah. How many downloads have you got? Oh, okay. And he can kind of get it now. But yeah, he was looking me up and he said to his friends that I'm a YouTuber, which I'm not. I have a YouTube channel, but
No, but I love
Yeah.
that. I think what you said there, I think it speaks to all mothers everywhere. There's a couple of things you said. I think number one was the beautiful chaos in motherhood, because you said we started in these four walls, we'll take them for a walk. I found 30 minutes here, got them to do the mic testing. And that's how, as mothers, we have to look at life. Sometimes it's like, don't wait for things to be perfect. Do that. If you've got 30 minutes, make it count, right? And I remember when I spoke to Maxine Nwaneri, she wrote a book, The Future is Greater, and she was saying how she still writes in like, I can't remember the time slots she used.
It's like literally 15 minutes.
15 minutes. And I think it goes to show it's not the time you have, it's the time you use, right? And I think that it's exactly how mom life is. I mean, us starting this podcast, we started in our dressing gown. We didn't know. I remember speaking to our first guest, and we were like, "Oh, we asked them." It started. There was no magic, right, until you start.
Do you know what, Tiffany? I'm remembering there that we definitely did one where you had half your head braided and the other half not. And now we've put them on YouTube. That'll be out there.
Well, because when you're like in a weird, I don't care. I used to care. But yeah, I think that goes to show, isn't it? It's just this idea of doing things and then you get better, right? You said you were approached by a channel, and it's this idea that until you start, nothing happens. Is there anything else? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
Alex.
I was just going to say, like we have found time around, my child's asleep. Is your child asleep? Can we record? And we've got a bit better now at managing to work around each of the schedules. We know each of the schedules a bit better, but finding that time around where are your children, what are they doing? Oh, I've got swimming, I've got this. We're making it work. And it sounds like you had to do exactly that and fortunately your husband managing to get them out of the way, on a walk. That sounds ideal. Get them out of the house.
That was also like him unplugging from his stuff too. So it was beneficial for everyone because they get their daddy time, I get my space, they go outside. Like it was just part of our routine then. And once you've done it once, every season gets easier because I have my processes, my workflows, and I've presented on it a few times as a workshop for people on how to do your DIY podcast and what I use and how I do it. And I can send you a link after this if you want to share it in the show notes because it was recorded and uploaded to YouTube from a local university here. And I was trying to show people just how I started, what I use. You can make it as simple or as like anything. You can make a podcast into a business in itself, or you can use it as a channel. And for me, I like to use it as a channel for education, awareness. It's part of my marketing, but it's also serving a need for me in that I'm able to ask people questions, but then I get to record them and share it with other people. So it's beneficial for everyone. And by splitting it into the three, I thought, well, I can promote their stuff a bit more. I can give them more content. So I'm creating content for them to use if they want to. So I just tried to approach it from, I'd written a first book it was called Startup Blogging. And it was about how I started doing my things and blogging about it. And that's how it started gaining attention and traction. But it was very much about that, how you need to go first and you need to put it out there. But there's so many organic and free and I guess more accessible tools now than there ever were in terms of if you're not a tech savvy person or it scares you, you can use a platform that does that for you. So there's not as many barriers to starting things either, which is great for people who want to experiment. And just because you start it doesn't mean you have to keep doing it forever if you decide it's not for you.
I like that. And I think that tells me that you're a very confident person. And I know it's a big question, but where does your confidence come from, Amy?
Probably from trauma, like most people. I read something recently that said like productivity is a trauma response, but no, I've definitely had experiences where I had to learn to use my voice. I had to learn to advocate for myself. The experience of losing a baby, I remember feeling, I had to go to the ER multiple times, and I remember thinking, it will never get worse than this. I will never be more mortified or embarrassed. And I didn't need to feel like that. I didn't need to feel shame or embarrassment, but those were the feelings that were coming up. And I just thought to myself, public speaking will never bother me as much after this, because I've been so exposed, and I've had 3 C-sections with my kids, and they've all been necessary. And I just feel like I've had so much control taken away from me in different areas, that what I can control, my voice, my creativity, how I use my body or my essence, or how I present myself in spaces, I'm going to own that more, because no one can take that away from you. And it's really, I'm reading Amy Lynch, is it Amy Lima? I can't remember her proper name. I'll send it to you after her book Worthy, which just came out, I think, in the last year. And I'm not fully finished it yet, but every chapter I'm just like, yes, I guess I just have this innate sense of worthiness that I deserve. It's not even confidence. It's just, I exist, therefore I'm here. I exist in this space, therefore I deserve to sit in this chair. Or I deserve to be here. And I've never felt like another person should be able to tell me to leave. Only I can, and I'm not going to exclude myself from those situations before even getting to that point. So number one is, I don't want to exclude myself, and I don't want to shame myself or reject myself. Number two is, when I apply for things, I might get rejected. I have gotten rejected from lots of things, but will that define my self-worth, and will I stop? No. So that's just kind of my cycle of how I do things. But really it comes down to, you see it with children now as a parent. If someone is raised to believe that they don't deserve to be here, or that they're a burden, they will operate in the world very differently. And I was raised on a farm in rural Canada. I had 2 sisters growing up, and my parents were around often. And I was never made to feel like I couldn't do what I wanted to do. Even though my parents had like a traditional background, we grew up Catholic, all these things, there was still, I think, this element of, we're raising daughters, so we have to make sure they can be educated and stand on their own 2 feet. And I think a lot of it comes from childhood, but also the experiences you have as you get older, and whether you let them define your worthiness as a human, or whether you kind of integrate them or transmute them into something else.
And I think as well, it sounds as though like you've always had that kind of innate worthiness, but that motherhood has had an impact on that as well. And I think for me, I would say that the big change for motherhood is that I've just got less patience with the kind of the barriers, and the like, I just care less and I didn't care that much before about what people think of me. And it sounds like you've got a similar headspace to that. And I really like what you say about not rejecting yourself. And I think it's there's a podcaster called Elizabeth Day, and I think it was her that said she never wants to be the one that says no to herself, even if it's something crazy and ridiculous. Fine, if someone else says no to her, at least she tried, and she wasn't the one who put the barrier in the way. And I think it's a really healthy perspective to take.
It helps if you, so I'm very intuitive, and becoming a parent helped me more with that, but I was very intuitive before, and then it just got reinforced more by listening to my body and different things and my kids. But I think there's a difference between your intuition telling you to do something and pursue something versus your sense of validation or trying to be liked. So if you can parse through those things, and you won't always know until you try.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes your body tells you when you feel nervous in a situation. Like I was definitely nervous speaking on stages with my kids or bringing them into business spaces. And I experienced like the postpartum sweats and all the lack of regulation around your emotions and your hunger, and everything is just all over the place. But I didn't view that as like it'll be like this all the time. I just view it as like, okay, my body's telling me right now it doesn't feel safe in this environment. How can I soothe myself? How can I create structure or rituals to soothe my nervous system? And as I've gotten older, I've started realizing, okay, as parents, we're meant to model that for our kids. I don't always model it. It's a constant daily, like, how much can you regulate yourself when they're not regulated? And then that will help you with these kind of situations where you're going for something new. It's out of your comfort zone, because then you can recognize the emotions in your body or the feelings in your body are just your body trying to keep you safe. It's just but your intuition might be telling you, no, you really need to go for this opportunity, Alex, or Tiffany asked for that raise or whatever it is. But it'll come from a different place, I think, if you tap into your intuition versus do it from an external validation.
There's so many interesting points you raised there. I think I liked what you said about how the power we have to shape our experiences. And I think I love that you grew up in this, balanced, well-loved environment. I didn't quite have that, so I have had to work on it. But it's always interesting to hear from people who have that, because I think that is somewhere where we get our confidence from. I think people turn to religion, people turn to different things for that validation, but I think it's always interesting. I think that's one of the reasons why I love being a mom. I've now got an opportunity to give that to somebody.
I won't say it was perfect, like my parents, but I will say my parents, when I was 6 months old, my parents were in a very bad car accident and they almost died. And so I grew up, it was very talked about as a child that you should appreciate your sisters and don't fight with your sisters. You almost didn't have sisters. Like I was raised from early on forever, knowing that I should be grateful for different things. But I think my parents parented us differently after that than they would have before, because of that, like a near-death experience makes you not sweat the small stuff as much. And I don't know what they would have been like before, because I never got to know them like that. So I just feel that we had that in the background all the time. And it kind of humbles you too, to know that like tomorrow isn't always guaranteed. So do the best you can today. Try to be present.
Yeah. That in itself, I think it's powerful. That idea of how trauma can shape you for better, because I don't know if you've ever come across Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I read that book I think every year. So I'm just like, I need to remind myself. And I think again, this idea that we all will experience trauma, but what are the new lenses we're looking at life through? And I love that gave you that early narrative. And now you have that, and you're always going to have that. Do you
heard of Dr. Edith Eva Eger?
Pardon?
Have you heard of Dr. Edith Eva Eger? She trained
Edith.
around. She was in a camp in the Holocaust, but she was a younger person.
Okay.
I believe she was 14, but she became a psychologist later in life when she was a parent in the United States, and she's written a few books, and a lot of her writing is relevant to, if you like reading Man's Search for Meaning, because she comes at it from the psychological point of view, but also she was a trained classical ballet dancer before World War II began. So she talks about art and beauty and joy and finding those moments in between life's difficult situations. But it's Like her stuff, I think everyone should read and have it as a reference point because it's universal. We all experience grief, loss.
Yeah, I'm
and
just looking her up actually, and I can see the book, The Gift, 14 Lessons to Save Your Life. So I'm going to
The
put that
Gift
on my...
and The Choice is the other one.
The Choice.
Yeah.
I wonder, now that you've been through all this, how do you raise your children? I'm interested to know, are there certain, like any kind of like strategies? I don't know, strategy sounds so business-like. Are there any kind of perspectives that shape how you parent now?
So I have 3 boys. I never grew up with brothers. So I feel like every age I'm learning. And then I can apply it to the younger 2, but I can't always learn in advance of the older one. So I feel like I'm constantly like getting to maybe the top of something or to an understanding of something. And then every 6 months, I feel like kids change. There's like a growth spurt or a different food they don't like or a different behavior or something, there's always something. So I've learned to not, I guess, react super immediately in the moment because it might be a phase. When they're really young, when they're babies, you have to react early on, especially if your intuition is telling you, I think they're really sick, you take them to the hospital. You have that primal knowing sometimes. And as they've gotten older, I've kind of looked at things like I feel such a young parent. I can't give anyone advice. And that's why I ask other people for advice. But I really feel like, okay, is this a phase? Is this not a phase? And one of our children, we just recently had him diagnosed with ADHD, and we're in the process of waiting. In Canada, there's a waiting period for autism assessment and different things. And depending on where you live, you have to go through your family GP. Some people don't have a family doctor. We're fortunate that we do. But it's really made me realize, wow, okay, we have to be our kids' advocates as well, because the doctor has 1,000 patients. They can't keep on top of everything. So I think I try to raise them right now so that I can be an advocate for them, keep track of things between school, medical, all that stuff, so that I can progress things more. But my husband was also raised on a farm, a really small farm in the west of Ireland, which was more remote than where I'm from. And he had his parents, it's almost like a generational difference between his parents and my parents. So he had an even more traditional upbringing
I can
than
imagine,
I did.
to be honest.
Yeah, the whole like laundry drying above the range where you cook your food type upbringing. So more similar to my dad's upbringing in some ways. So I think we both have that grounded background, and we left London mainly because we wanted to have some grass for a backyard. And I know we could have moved further out of the city to get that, but we decided we wanted to be a bit closer to certain people and certain opportunities, and that it would be a lot of commute time if we stayed in London. So those kind of values, I guess, shape a lot of our decisions. But then I feel like we're constantly raising kids. I think each kid, it's almost like a business, each kid. If you think of like a business and product lines or service lines, it's like each one has their own thing. Like you do a SWOT analysis for each kid or something of like, okay, what do they need? And it helps me to, maybe I'm compartmentalizing things, but that helps me to know, okay, well, what's our foundation though? What do we decide based on? Because if you're not coming from the same values or the same point of view, then what's important to you might not be important to the other person. So that can just be a lot harder with the more kids you have. So I think that's something I've learned, that we have to kind of like keep checking back with, okay, what's working for this one? What worked well last year in winter for this one? Because here we have a lot of distinct seasons, and there's like hockey season, swimming season, all the different weather. So you kind of have to change activities and change your meal times and all that stuff based on the weather and the seasons. So I think we do it a lot more naturally than we would have if we didn't grow up on farms, because we did that growing
Yeah.
up. So yeah, that's
can't-
probably a weird answer to have, but agriculture is like how I inform my parenting. And I've realized more and more like, wow, I have these like innate wisdom with some things that I just saw my grandparents doing or my parents doing, and I just know what to do with these different things that I didn't learn in school. So yeah.
I really like the idea of the SWOT analysis for children. I only have one, so I don't have to juggle the different likes and dislikes and stuff like that. That sounds like make life really hard, or hard to keep track of, not hard. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think I come from a background with quite a big family, and because I only have one, I sometimes feel that Ted is then going to miss out on that big family aspect. So like in some ways, I'm kind of envious of the idea of having multiple kids playing with one another. But then I hear people talk about it and I'm like, oh, actually, I quite like it. It's a bit calmer than it could be. You know, I think hearing about your different backgrounds, even though they sound like they came from different places, it sounds like they have had quite a lot of crossover. And how important do you think that is?
I didn't marry anyone else, so I can't compare. But if I ever do, I can check back with you. But no, I feel like, yeah, we had to do this because we got married in Ireland. It was very traditional. We were living in Australia, but to get married in Ireland, it couldn't be outside. It had to be in a structure. Most structures are churches. So we had a non-religious, we didn't do the Eucharist and all that stuff, but we had to do the marriage course in order to get married there. And I had to get a letter from my childhood priest saying I had permission to marry this guy from another country, another diocese or whatever. And so I was like, really? But this is like going deep into personal stuff, but I had proposed to my husband when we were overseas. And so we had already this like flipped thing going on, and we were going to elope in Australia, but people wanted to have a party. So we compromised and decided, okay, we'll get married in Ireland. But there was all this logistical stuff we had to do. And because we've lived in a few different countries, I think there's like 10 or 11 immigration applications we had to do for different visas and different permanent residency things. Maybe I just like to make life harder than it is. I don't know. I always say if it's a video game, we're playing on hard mode and like 3 boys, different backgrounds, different passports, all this stuff. But because we'd already done all that, I feel like we're good at logistics. We're good at approaching things as like project management. He's got a finance background. I've got like a marketing communications background. So we have different skills. But a lot of stuff is really like writing down what you want or what you want to achieve or where you want to live or how you want to live. And then just figuring out as best as you can how to get there. And then I believe in manifesting. So I like to let magic happen too. But if you don't write it down or you don't say what you want, it doesn't always happen as quickly or as clearly as what you want. So I think that has kind of shaped how we do things, and we don't always view things as a problem that can't be solved. It's just like another thing that is happening that we will find a solution for.
I like that. And just like breaking stuff down, I guess, into the steps for how you get there.
But yeah, I guess if I married someone from Australia and they weren't religious, I wouldn't have had to get so many letters to get married. But yeah, there's like so many layers to immigration stuff and religious stuff and all this stuff that just, again, I guess I was like, well, is this really going to stop us from doing what we want? So I think I have pretty strong willpower, I guess.
But it also sounds like you're doing different things. I think it sounds like obviously you're quite organized. Do you have any advice for? I don't know about that. Everyone always says no, but in terms of like organizing your life, how do you manage everything in terms of a schedule? I imagine you do. Do you have anything you do that could help our audience? You're also trying to do multiple things.
Yeah. So everyone always says outsource, delegate, all this stuff. And I found when the pandemic happened, I was like, this is terrible advice because no one can help us. No one can come clean our house right now. No one can do my laundry for me. No one can watch my kids. Like, you take away all the coping mechanisms that people use to make their life function, and you see what happens. And there was a lot of mental health challenges and kids getting screen time, too much screen time, all that stuff, because people just don't have any other choices. So I think, first of all, look at what your situation is, because the advice that I give, I don't even like to give advice. I just tell anecdotes based on my lived experiences. And right now I live in a city that's a little over 1 million people. I think it's getting maybe close to 1.5. But we chose this place because we wanted to have like an under 30-minute commute time if either of us were working out of the home. So that was like tick box. Is there a school in the neighborhood? Tick box. We can walk them to school if we need to, or, juggle that. And is there a grocery store nearby? Is it all the basics? You might not have those though. So, and you might be a single parent, or you might have a child with additional needs. And so, or more than one child with additional needs. So I feel like you have to just look at what are the resources you have within your immediate house.
But what about you're talking about the workflows. I'm interested in that.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So just like my stuff that I've designed my workflows around is based on those things. So it's like, what are your immediate supports in your community or your household or whichever? And then some of the practical ones would be setting our family up with a household email. So my husband and I both share this email address that all the teacher stuff, all the school stuff, all the medical stuff, anything to do with coaching or sports or extracurriculars goes to this place. And it's not, the mental load is on me or him. We're trying to, I wouldn't say share it, distribute it evenly, because you could say, well, you're overlapping then, but it's so we have like a shared calendar. We both are across the same thing. My stuff, I just don't book meetings before a certain time or after a certain time, because I know how long it takes me to get the kids. And then maybe I can do something when they're at home after school, but I also don't count on that. So like all asynchronous stuff that doesn't need to be done face to face, when does it make sense to do that? So when I talk about remote work with kids, with people, or flexible work with kids, I talk about asynchronous and synchronous a lot, because we learned during the pandemic about that from schools. Some people wanted to do remote schools, and the synchronous activities that were like this, face-to-face interviews, or we're doing things at the same time, can be really challenging when you're a parent and your kids are younger, especially if they don't know how to read or read instructions or direct their own play, or they want you to play with them. So it's also dangerous sometimes. So I have the play area behind me here, but like I would always do anything if I was working alongside them, standing at the counter, standing at a ledge so I can be in the same area as them, or outside at a park or whatever on your phone if you have to do that. Some people don't want to do them at the same time at all. That's totally fine. But the reality is, for lots of parents, you have crossover. I see people picking up their kids from school, they're on a Zoom call or they're on a meeting. And that can be easier to do when you're walking to and from school pickup, like get on a call, attend a meeting, have your earbuds in. But you also need to watch for traffic when you're walking home with your kids. So you have to kind of look at, well, what activities can be coinciding with when the kids are around? What ones do I absolutely need to have like for deep work? For me, it's like, I don't want to have to be interrupted every 5 minutes for a snack or to show me your drawing, because that's not fair to me, but it's also not fair to them. I don't want them to feel like they're a burden or they're inconveniencing me. So I try to do my deep work when they're at school or daycare, or on weekends when my husband can take them somewhere, or in evenings if they're at sports practice or something, because I'm right now doing more school pickup than my husband is. So, and that'll change depending on the season. So you have to just look at the time you have, the tools you have. Does it need to be face-to-face, or can it be done like in those 10 and 15-minute increments? So like any podcast research I would do, or guest questions I'd send in advance, that's stuff I can do while the kids are playing, or I can schedule the meetings, or I can send some follow-up things, or I can, do research, or even attend like a replay of something or listen to something on demand. But you just have to see, I find anytime there's a screen involved, a laptop or a desktop or your phone, the kids are always going to view it as you versus, them versus this device. So can you listen to some stuff on your Bluetooth in your car? Is the podcast clean, or is the stuff clean? Can you listen to it with your kids? I sometimes do if they're fine listening to it. So you just have to look at what works for you.
I really like it. I'm going to steal the house email tip. I think that one is genius, because both me and my husband get all the emails from nursery, whereas we haven't necessarily for like medical appointments and stuff like that. And it definitely makes a difference to both be getting that information rather than it being on me to make sure he knows about it. So yeah, I'm definitely stealing that one.
Well, in the school apps now, I saw someone post this thing about like, I'm running out of storage space on my phone from all these school apps. So we have 2 different schools our kids go to. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this year we have to download 2 or 3 different apps and they don't send emails anymore. So I got to go in there and refresh and make sure, like, is there an emergency at the school? So you have to also decide like who's the point person for if there is an emergency or whatever, or there's like a child that needs to get picked up. But we have this visual calendar in the kitchen as well that is like a whiteboard calendar. Put appointments on that in addition to the tech one. Meal stuff, we don't always put stuff on there, but just visuals. Now the oldest can read. He can tell the other ones what we're having for dinner, or he can do like I moved stuff down to their level, their dishes, so they could set the table. And I put their clothes, the toddler's clothes are in our kitchen drawers, like in one of our kitchen drawers, because I don't want to go up and down the stairs. And my husband doesn't need to do that either. He can pick out his own clothes every day. It's probably where the cutlery is supposed to go, but for now, that's what works for us. And like the toothbrushes are right by in the closet that's right by the door when we leave, because that's the last thing we do before we go. But if I have to tell them to go up and do it, that's like transitions are hard. So I'm just like, how can I, that's my biggest tip, I guess. Just how can you do something unconventional that seems weird, but makes your life easier
and keeps you sane.
And also I tell my kids, I'm like, I can't be yelling at you all the time. I have to save my voice for the podcast. Like, just do your thing. So
I get that. I do some weird things now, like living 2 person in the kitchen. I'm really proud of my wife's kitchen, but I'm thinking about morning, night, and where things need to be when they're needed. Like it's a bottle my son uses for nursery, and it's just a nursery bottle. And I've told my husband, do not use it around the house, because once they do, it travels around the house and then we can't find it. So yeah, I definitely think that there are quirky things we have to adopt as parents. That's not normal, but it makes our life easier.
And think about yourself too, not just your kids, because for me, it's like, oh, I might need an extra change of clothes in the car for when they do spill on me, because there's been so many times where I packed them extra stuff and then I was like, oh, I've got this shirt on now that has a stain on it. Like, you don't always look after your own stuff, but you'll look after theirs. So make sure that you look after your stuff.
That's such a good tip, like spare t-shirt. I mean, it's happened to me as well, where you get something spilled over you and you're like, oh, I've got loads of stuff for them in this bag, but now I look like this.
I know another topic that you're passionate about, Amy, is parent-friendly professional development. I'd love to know a bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a mouthful, but I worked in education and training in Australia, and it was with the government, but with this company that also delivered professional development. So I was running their webinar program, their social media, different things. They had a members portal where people could access members only webinars and content and stuff. So I always did professional development when I was overseas and tried to upskill. I remember when I was first working with an art school here in Canada, I went to learn about Twitter at this, like, it was a government workshop. But I thought, oh, okay, this Twitter thing, it's new. I need to look into what this is. And all the things that I would launch that were new technology channels in the roles that I was working in, it was usually because I'd gone to a networking event or I'd spoken to someone. So I just knew, for me personally, how important that was for my career to upskill, but to also add value to wherever I was working with clients or as an employee. So when I relocated over to Ireland and then England, I was doing remote work. And then the professional development became almost like my way of connecting with people, because I didn't have a co-working space membership. And working remotely across a 10-hour time difference with Australia, I didn't have coworkers in real time. I would check in with them once a week for a morning meeting. And so it became like a lifeline in a way to making new friends or finding out new things going on in the city. And then when I started bringing my son with me, I just started realizing how much professional development wasn't very accessible. So like those early breakfast meetings, the cocktail times, the after 6 p.m. tech events, all that stuff that you just wouldn't go to because it's during the bedtime or whichever. And I decided, okay, if I were to change this, what would it look like? And during my second pregnancy, I was working with this consulting company here in Ottawa. And part of my role, I was doing a maternity cover contract while pregnant. And I was in charge of hosting these CEO breakfasts with another partner at a law firm who is the marketing lead. And we would go once a month and set up the breakfast. And I would be more and more pregnant every month. And it was always at 7 a.m. And I would just be like, oh, why are these at this time? Why do they make it so early? What, like, who's coming to this? And what would I do if I wanted to do like a CEO breakfast? What would I do? After 10 a.m., after school drop off, I would feed everyone with food that kids would want to eat, not just like charcuterie and all this stuff. I would have croissants and fruit and different things. And I would set up a play area so that people could actually speak to each other. And that's how I kind of started doing. I did a focus group. I did a program here in Canada that was an impact academy. And it was kind of like design thinking and trying to validate your idea. But I started interviewing people and finding out, is pop-up childcare really something that you need? Or is that like a must-have for you if we have this event? And most people were like, no, if you have toys and we're allowed to bring our kids, like I would come. So I realized that a lot of the barriers that I thought might be there too were like the bar was so low. There was nothing accommodating people to begin with. So now I'm seeing more and more midday things, like a 10 a.m. thing or a lunchtime session or finishing before 3 or 4. And if it's under an hour, I'm always like, good for you guys for trying to make it accommodating, because who wants to go to like a 4-hour workshop right in the middle of either the morning routine or the afternoon routine? You just won't sign up. So that's kind of how I started looking at it based on my background, but then also based on the kind of stuff I wanted to go to and what stuff I was finding or not finding there. And a lot of it came down to like the length of time, the time of day. What could you get there on transit? Was there parking? Was there free parking on site? Or do you have to scramble to find parking and then walk a kilometer with your stroller? You're probably not going to go
And then where do you
to that either.
Where do you put the pushchair when you get there as well?
Exactly. You had to look at like move the coat racks out so we have stroller parking and all that stuff. So that's what we would do. And then people started asking to pick my brain. I won't name names, but they were big tech companies and social impact, some non-for-profits. They didn't want to pay me for my advice, but they wanted to pick my brain. So I would give them some ideas, because at the time I was like, well, I'm an activist, I'm very passionate, and I don't want to hold this information inside. I've gotten a bit more savvy with that now in terms of, here's my guest speaker fee, or here's my consult link.
Yes.
Or here's my podcast episode where I distributed this and I own the IP, and you can share this episode if you want, or just listen to it. So yeah, I've learned to get more strategic with that stuff, but also I was flattered that people were reaching out to me to ask how to do pop-up childcare. So that to me was a sign in 2018, 2019, before everything changed for a few years and people became more aware of the need for flexibility. I thought, okay, these are early adopter companies and they're pretty innovative, and they're starting to think about these things in terms of attracting and retaining talent, returner programs, trying to be more accessible and live by their diversity, equity, and inclusion values. Okay, these people are trying to work towards that, but then it's not always budgeted for, or it's not always forthcoming to pay for those things. So I feel like there's still a lot of ways to go, but people are starting to add a few more elements to their things that make it more parent friendly.
Okay. I don't know whether you have any more questions, Alex, so we can start to wrap up.
No, I'm smiling at the idea of you thinking, who wants to do this breakfast at 7 a.m? Because in reality, do any of the people who are there at 7 a.m. want to be doing that at 7? I think probably not. And
I would say that some of them don't know any different.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, I can't say much about their family structure, their dynamics, but some people are gone before the kids are gone to school, or they're not doing the drop off. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a choice or if it's just the way their family works. But then some people, I think if you look at people in leadership positions and the gender pay gap and all these things, to me, it's very clear why the representation is what it is, because the representation at these breakfasts aren't the same people that are at the school gates. So I think, to me, there's a bit of a correlation there. And if we asked every breakfast at 6 or 7 or 8 a.m. to take a selfie of the room, maybe we could start to connect the dots a bit better for people. But I won't say too much more, but I feel like there's it's so like clear.
There's a whole other podcast episode in that, isn't there?
Oh yeah. But I'm
going to steal some of your ideas for sure, Amy, though.
Please do. The more, like, I've always loved creative mornings. I just found out this morning they've been around for 16 years. One of the talks I did was there, but she started as like just wanting meetups in New York City for creatives, and now there's chapters around the world. So I've always wanted people in other places hosting meetups and doing things like that, because I don't think it's going to change on its own.
I love that. No, I think you're fantastic, and I love the activism, and I think what I'm loving and really learning about motherhood is how we can get new lenses, and almost there's a place for mothers in careers and business, and I know it's not always easy, but I love that from your learning as a mother, as a parent, you've realized that something is to change, and you're doing something about it. And I think that's how we all make progress, because after all, it's not a moment, it's a movement. So I think hopefully with the podcast, what we're doing, talking to other mothers, even now on my LinkedIn is flooded with other working parents, other working mothers. I mean, I never knew there was a community of other mothers. I spoke to Elizabeth Willits yesterday. She has a podcast, and she has a company called Investing in Women, and offer part-time work and flexible working and remote working for mothers. And she was saying, I mean, we just connected on so many levels, and I think that goes to show how we're all in this together. And I think the more we can all find a community, the more we can all do something about this, the bigger the community will get, the more changes we'll make, and hopefully the more progress we'll make in opening up workplaces and career spaces for women and working parents to thrive and to manage to juggle.
Yeah, and something we talked about when you first connected with me was I was very fortunate to work with a lot of smaller companies early on in my career that were women-led, that either became parents or already were parents when I worked with them, and that was before I became one. So I was really fortunate to see that modeled and to see successful leaders and people building things that didn't exist and having really profitable businesses and serving clients really well. And I just feel like if you can't see that in your immediate circle, then you need to go and find those people. And like you said, plug into the communities that restore you and make you feel seen, but also be wary of using LinkedIn in a way that I find it becomes a silo for me, or like an echo chamber, because I'm only liking things that I'm seeing a lot of stuff that I already agree with. So when I've done talks in the past, I've been mindful of trying to speak to audiences that maybe aren't talking about these things or thinking about this, because I'm really interested in sharing different perspectives with decision makers and leaders who may have never thought that it was an issue. And then I use my community of parents, or I plug back into my community of parents, is a better word for it, to regenerate myself, or to feel like, okay, this work is still important and it's still I still have the energy to do it. But if you're always talking to the people that you need to convert, that can be exhausting as an activist. So you kind of need to have that balance of feeling seen and heard already, and then exposing your ideas and different activism or advocacy to rooms of people that have power, can make different decisions, and maybe aren't totally on board with what you're saying yet.
Love that. Where can people find you online?
You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to join my echo chamber of parent-friendly professional development. So it's Amy Lynch. I've got a picture in my background cover photo of me talking while baby wearing, and mixingbabysinbusiness.com is the website I set up where I share the podcast. I have some free resources for people doing remote work and flexible work with kids. And even if you want to do public speaking and different things, I share things about that too.
Amazing.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy Lynch. Thanks for taking the time. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.